Don't worry about reaching for a pen and paper today. Today's show comes with all of your math homework done for you by us. Not that it's a particularly difficult bit of arithmetic either, which is the whole point, because today, on day 54 of our 90 Deals in 90 Days tracker, Donald Trump isn't remotely halfway there. Be generous and give him half of 1 point for a framework of a deal with the UK, and we'll give him a point for achieving a preliminary one with China, although there's trouble on that front to tell you about as well today. And Trump is just past his own 1 yard line, 1/90th of the way there. To put it bluntly, this is not a game. It's a gamble and a bad bet, to hear some economists talk about it, staking our very livelihoods and those of our children on reforging global trade using possibly illegal tariffs. As of today, the rates for steel and aluminum imports are now officially doubled, up to 50% now, while the White House went about evaluating final offers, whatever that means, from other countries on this self-imposed deadline day. And who knows, maybe today's the day. Maybe by the time we're off the air, there will be some real agreements and deals signed on paper, and they'll announce them. Maybe we'll even see that, quote, cascade that Peter Navarro promised. He's the aide who coined the, quote, 90 deals in 90 days promise. Or maybe they'll find that it's more difficult than that. Just this morning, Donald Trump was posting on social media about just how hard it is to make a deal with China's President Xi. A notable addendum to what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said last week. The talks were, quote, a bit stalled with China. Politico reporting this, quote, Trump thinks a call with Xi will help reset souring trade talks. But even if that conversation happens this week, as the White House said is likely, it is doubtful to be the breakthrough Trump is hoping for. Quote, the president is obsessed with having a call with Xi, said one person familiar with the trade talks, convinced he can personally hash out deep-seated divisions between the world's two largest economies mano a mano with Xi. Again, the stakes don't get much higher than this, especially when you consider what Trump's allies are preparing to do to millions of Americans right here at home. That big, whatever we want to call it, not so beautiful bill. That confluence is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. NPR's chief economics correspondent, Scott Horsley, is here. Also joining us, former senior advisor to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu's back, and MSNBC political analyst, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller, is here. I want to start with the calamitous state of no deals in 90 days, or we'll give him 1.5 deals in 90 days. Scott, is there any shift in the language or any? I mean, I know that the White House feels that it has its base so completely captive on all results, but they are still on the record as of today promising 90 units of something for which they have one.
Right. And they're trying to up the pressure on the trading partners today. This was sort of the deadline for all the other countries to come in with their best offer for a trade deal. It's interesting. The Congressional Budget Office came out today with a forecast of how much money they think the tariffs are going to raise over the next decade. And they projected that the tariffs that were in place yesterday would be made permanent over the next 10 years. Well, nothing over the last couple of months suggests that these tariffs are going to be anything like permanent over the next 10 years. They've gone up and down like a yo-yo. So how much bargaining pressure there really is on these other countries to come through with a deal is up in the air.
I want to ask about the impact of ignorance on negotiations. This is the Commerce Secretary talking to Senator Kennedy about sort of a pretty basic element of trade policy.
If Vietnam, for example, came to you tomorrow and said, okay, Mr. Secretary, you win. We're going to remove all tariffs and all trade barriers. Would the United States please do the same? Would you accept that deal?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. That would be the silliest thing we could do.
What's the purpose of reciprocity then? Is reciprocity not one of your goals? Are you telling the president that we shouldn't seek reciprocity? If that's what you're telling him, why are you trying to do these trade deals?
What do we want? We want to encourage Vietnam to produce products they're great at producing.
But I want to get back to reciprocity. You just said you don't believe in you don't accept reciprocity as a goal. What are you negotiating in these trade deals?
Why would we open our bank account and their bank account when
Why are
ours is
you
10 times bigger?
negotiating trade deals? You're trying to get other countries to lower their tariffs and trade barriers in return for us lowering ours.
That's true for the things that they'll take from us.
That's called reciprocity.
Of course.
So I want to be really precise here. I'm not trying to stupid shame anybody, especially not the only Secretary of Commerce that the United States of America has right now. And he might be really smart at other stuff, but he obviously doesn't know jack you know what about trade. This is the person in charge of the deals?
Well, Senator Kennedy is advancing what has been the standard U.S. position for decades, which is that we have historically been a country of low trade barriers, and we have encouraged other countries to lower their trade barriers. Donald Trump and his cabinet have adopted pretty much the opposite position, which is that we're going to raise our trade barriers and almost by default encourage other countries to raise theirs in response. And we're now sitting on the highest trade barriers in the U.S., the highest tariff levels in the United States since the Great Depression.
Yeah, I mean, and Mitch, I want to bring you in on this. I think that to pursue policies that history shows are foolish and devastating and damaging is one scandal. We've kept a close eye on that. To pursue policies that history shows are devastating and damaging are one of the factors that precede catastrophic foreign events like wars, from someone who has no idea what he's doing, is an even larger scandal, it would appear.
Well, first of all, John Kennedy, who has proven to be one of the most conservative senators and a huge Trump supporter, was trying to help the secretary out. Trump himself has said many, many times, we'd love to get to 0-0. So what should be clear now to everybody is there is no strategy. They don't know what they're doing. They're not on the same page. They're in opposite of each other, depending on what time of any day it happens to be. So Americans could, conclude that there is no plan. Look, my wife and I have 5 kids. We often say to our kids, bad decisions equal bad consequences. The decision to get into a trade war when there wasn't one before was a bad decision. And the consequence has been that today, I think the effective tariff rate is 22%, that even though we're not at 145%, Americans are paying somewhere between 10 and 22% more than they paid when Donald Trump went into office. So just think about going to the store and getting a loaf of bread, or buying chips or buying food for your family, and you're paying a 10% tax or a 22% tax on that. Everything is going up. It's not going down. And Donald Trump ran for office and said that his primary mission for running was to lower costs for working folks. And all he has done since he's been in office, besides mess everything up, is to raise prices, cut health care, make it harder for folks to live. And I just think it's not going to end well, besides the fact that they don't even have a deal yet, other than the one out of the 99 that they said they were going to have. So they're not even good at being bad at this point in time.
Tim, I know we're in a news cycle that blurs bias, right, and just so distorts so many things. But can we just freeze frame on Mr. Lutnick for a second? Because it's just an interesting window into how Trump has no standards. Trump ran the first time. Part of the appeal was he would bring in the best people. When you saw Mattis, you were like, oh, okay, maybe some of these people are really going to save us from whatever Trump doesn't know. Not what he did this time. Mr. Lutnick talked about, he's one of the richest people to ever serve in a cabinet, talked about his mother-in-law missing a Social Security check and being one of those good people who would never complain about it. Now he's making clear to, I don't know that there are many more MAGA members in the Senate than Kennedy, that he has no idea what the basic principles of trade are. And he's one of the people in charge of negotiating trade deals. In normal times, what sort of response should that elicit?
Yeah, it's good to sit on Lutnick because he is the most incompetent member of the cabinet in what is a pretty competitive category. And he's doing it by a wide margin. Like, and even people inside the Trump administration will say that. So that's not even those of us who are Trump opponents who are saying it. They were pointing fingers at Lutnick all the way back in February in blind quotes and Politico and other news outlets like that. So, he does not know what he's doing. But I think it's important that exchange was very revealing between him and Kennedy in another way that I just want to tease out, because we're looking at two kind of different types of dumb there. Like, Lutnick doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to tariffs. So making him the point man for it just because he was willing to suck up to Trump the hardest was a really dumb decision. And he's advancing very dumb policy, which is these tariffs, like you've mentioned, which there's plenty of historical record to show how it will damage the economy. But Kennedy there, who is trying, as I think Mitch pointed out, to nudge him the direction to a smarter policy, was revealing a kind of lack of savvy himself. Because John Kennedy doesn't seem to understand the policies that the candidate that he supported was going to implement. Because this idea, this pretense, he seems to have convinced himself of this lie that some Republicans told Wall Street Journal voters in order to get them to vote for Trump, that like Trump has a desire to lower trade barriers and to lower tariffs, and that's the point of this, to get to some great deal at the end. But that's not the plan. Anybody that listens to Donald Trump knows that's not the plan. And John Kennedy has been whole hog signed up on the Donald Trump bandwagon, pushing him and promoting him and trying to get him elected so that he could implement this tariff policy that John Kennedy knows is terrible. So to me, like, that's a different kind of stupid, but it's stupid in its own right.